Sorry for the delay on the reviews. I had a bunch of projects to do this week for my college. But I am back and I'm gonna review every game 2 from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I figured this was the easier way to do this, so this is the way I'm gonna do it. Deal with it. We're gonna start with Monday and then we're gonna go from scratch. And let's go. Hands down, one of my favorite games so far this postseason, Thunder Grizzlies Game 2. It had drama from the opening, and the Grizzlies came out on fire, actually. Not the Thunder, the Grizzlies. They came out swinging. The Thunder would cut in the deficit before the break, but it just seemed like every time the Thunder wanted to come back, the Grizzlies' defense held up strong. And the Grizzlies did something I didn't think they were capable of doing, and that's putting up 30 points of offense, 30 offensive points in a quarter. And they did that in the fourth when they really needed it the most, because that's when OKC was making their push. That's when Durant was starting to get the shots to fall. Westbrook was starting to get a little bit cold near the end. He made a couple careless turnovers, I figured, and a couple of ill-advised shots. And of course, Thunder fans complain about him all the time for doing that. But give the Grizzlies defensive credit, dude. I mean, this is what they do. This is how they have to win games, and it showed. But the Grizzlies were up 5 in the final minute. Westbrook makes a saving pass for an unbelievable 3 made by Kevin Durant in an and one, which put Marc Gasol at his 5th foul at the time. It was one of the greatest shots I've ever seen a player make. And then Kendrick Perkins had one of his highest moments of his career at the final seconds when Westbrook just shot it up a 3. Perkins got the rebound he was rebounding over Courtney Lee, by the way, so I guess that's not much of an accomplishment, but he still laid it in and forced overtime. Now, you would think, okay, the Thunder is going to close this out in overtime, right? No, only 6 points they scored. And Kevin Durant just couldn't find the mark. Westbrook couldn't find the mark. And that's your story. Memphis ended up winning 111-105 in OKC for Game 2. And mostly due to clutch buckets by Zach Randolph, who ended up with 25 points. Mike Conley had 19. Marc Gasol had 16 before he fouled out. Courtney Lee, 16. And then Beno Udrih, 14 off the bench. Durant had his usual 36 points, while Westbrook had 29, even though they both missed quite an amount of shots. They both missed like 16 shots apiece. I don't think the Thunder are in danger, but this is still not a good sign. They need to win one in Memphis, which I know they're capable of doing, but this was kind of disappointing, seeing as they were so dominant in Game 1. So we'll see what happens in Game 3, which will be on Thursday night on TNT. Now, this was on Monday night, by the way. This was before I had to wake up early the next morning to go in and finish a couple projects of mine. Well, we're to finish one of them. I already had one completed, but that's beside the point. And I'm kind of glad this game was kind of ugly as it was for only that reason, is that I did have to go to bed early. So it appears that the Warriors went to bed earlier than I did, because they didn't show up a dang bit in Game 2. Blake Griffin owned them like a sack lunch, and he had his best game of his postseason career, 35 points. He didn't get many rebounds, but he didn't really need to. I think the Warriors were disinterested in the entire game. And I've noticed, if Blake Griffin doesn't foul out of games, the Warriors are in trouble. Noteworthy, is there really anything noteworthy to take out of this game? No, there's not. I mean, the Warriors just got smacked. It seemed like they were way too content for taking one in LA that they just cashed it in tonight and just get ready for Game 3 in the Oracle. I hate when teams do this, because that kind of gives you kind of want to build on that momentum, not just take it easy the next game after you take Game 1. Just say, okay, we got one on the road, let's just cash it in. That is not championship philosophy to me. And I hate when teams do that. But credit the Clippers, or maybe they tried and the Clippers were just that dominant. So either way, the Clippers won by 40, 138-98. and Game 3 will be Thursday night as well on TNT. Ugly game. This was more than just about the game itself. It's come to my attention that the Pacers coach was just notified, Vogel, that even if he wins this series, his job for next year as a Pacers coach is not protected, even if they win this series. And not only that, it doesn't help that Lance Stevenson and one of the Pacers newcomers, Evan Turner, got in a little fistfight scuffle after the game, apparently. And this just shows that, is there any control on the Pacers sidelines? And that might be why Vogel might be fired, even if they win this series. I mean, I think for him, it's to at least make the Eastern Conference Finals, to face the Heat. I mean, if he wins the finals, then obviously he's secured. I mean, but the Pacers, as for the game itself, the first half was they were sloppy again a little bit, but they weren't as sloppy as they were in Game 1, even though they were trailing by 4 at halftime. But the third quarter, Paul George led the explosion. Luis Scola was the only reason the first half was as close as it was. He ended up with 20. But Paul George had his fingerprints all over the third quarter, as well as George Hill. Those two took over the third. Paul George made a 3 at the end of the quarter to cap off a 31-13 run, which would put them up by 14 heading into the fourth, and the game would never be close again. The Pacers ended up winning 101-85, but you sometimes wonder about the Pacers sometimes now. I mean, Indiana fans can probably feel it. Are they sure of themselves? Can they win? How far can they go in the playoffs? But first, they got to win one in Atlanta. And it's come to my attention that out of their last 18 games in Atlanta, they only have 2 wins. One of them being Game 6 in the last year's playoff series. But the Pacers, I don't know. I think they're in trouble. I might be proven wrong, and I'm sure I will. But Game 3 will be on NBA TV, not TNT, NBA TV on Thursday. And we'll just go from there and see how it goes, But I think Frank Vogel is in trouble, and you can quote me on that. Take notes, Golden State Warriors, because the Nets did take Game 1 on the road, but did that mean they took Game 2 off? No, they battled this one to the very end. Part of it was the battle of the Johnsons, Joe Johnson versus Amir, but other parts of it was just who wanted this game more. The Raptors were in a tough, gritty fight from start to finish, and they were up 6 at half, but the Nets slowly creep back into it. But once again, although I will say Kevin Garnett had a much better game, but Paul Pierce, he struggled the entire game. He made a couple shots in the fourth, but he never really got going at all. And it's kind of a shame because I thought most of the other Nets starters did decent. I mean, Darren Williams wasn't hitting his shots much, but really it was kind of a missed opportunity for the Nets, really, because the Raptors had 20 turnovers. They turned it over 10 more times than the Nets. Yet the Nets just couldn't finish them off and capitalize, and largely because of a much improved performance by Raptors star DeMar DeRozan. He ended up with 30 points, getting to the line 14 times, making 12 of those free throws. He took some criticism in Game 1, and he clearly came out and played much better in Game 2. Amir Johnson had 16 points, 9 boards. The Raptors' Grievous Vasquez didn't play as well, but he still had 11 points, 8 assists. So what I think about this is I kind of think the Raptors are in trouble. They need to take one on the road, and I don't know if they're capable of doing that. This Nets team looks focused. It seems like Jason Kidd has them on the right track. And the Raptors, have lost 19 road games this year. Not that really plays much of a factor. It's still a pretty good road record. I think, but I just don't know if they're capable of beating the Nets on the road. I'm not sure. We'll have to find out soon enough, and they have game 3 on Friday night on ESPN 2's. So keep out for that one, because it could be a doozy. Back to my point on not slouching when you take a game 1 on the road. The Washington Wizards didn't get that memo that the Warriors decided, because they came out to play ball, and they dominated the first quarter of this game. And it all starts with Bradley Beal didn't really get going in the second half. I was Nene. Nene continued his momentum from game 1. The Bulls would slowly crawl back, though. I mean, they kept fighting through, and they were up as much as 10 in the fourth quarter. And I was like, okay, split series, get ready for game 2. Bradley Beal had other plans. He decided he was going to make a few threes, tie the game up, and almost sunk the game winner in, but he came up just short. But I will say at the end, there should have been... They should have acknowledged Taj Gibson's timeout. They went for a loose ball. The ball's getting kicked around everywhere, and they just decided to call a jump ball, which the Wizards would eventually win, which set up the miss by Bradley Beal. And they missed the timeout. I mean, he was clearly calling it, but they didn't see it. So, I mean, what can you do? And then it goes to overtime. The Wizards would go up by 6. No one would make it to cut it to 2. And then John Wall makes a careless foul, which cuts the deficit to 2. And, of course, the Bulls get one more chance. And then Nene fouls Kurt Heinrich. And that puts Heinrich on the line. And that fouls out Nene Hilario for the game. He ended up with 17.7 boards, by the way. And then Heinrich, and let me just say this. Heinrich, before these free throws, he was going ice cold. And same with DJ Augustine, once they realized they needed to put the 6'6" I can't, however much height Trevor Ariza is on DJ Augustine. Once they figured that out, the Bulls offense really slowed down. And Kurt Heinrich was one of those that just went ice cold. He missed the first free throw. Then, of course, he tried to bounce the second free throw off the front rim. Didn't work. Wizards win 101-99 on the road. Take a 2-0 series lead. Chicago, they're done. And I clearly underestimated the Wizards of Washington. They are very impressive. There is something really impressive going on down there. Are they for real? For now, yeah. I say so. Can they beat the Miami Heat the next round? Should they win the series? I don't know. I think there'll be an interesting matchup. I think they're capable of taking at least a couple games, but I'm not sure. I mean, this Wizards team is very interesting. I mean, they have like very in the middle guys. I mean, they do have Trevor Ariza though, who's been to the finals and has a championship. They do have Nene Hilario, who's been deep in the playoffs. I mean, they got Marcin Gortat, however it's pronounced. John Wall is developing before our very eyes. Bradley Beal's a pretty decent shooter. Andre Miller's been there, done that. Drew Gooden's been around for quite a while. I think the Wizards I think they're going to continue to surprise some people. I don't think they're going to win the championship. Let's not get crazy, Washington fans. But what I like what I see. And this Wizards team is going to get better throughout the years, I think. Game 3, though, will be Friday on ESPN. Watch out for them Wizards, man. They're crazy. Game 2 of this game really took me by surprise. And I say this because before the game, it was determined that Al Jefferson had a plantar fasciitis. I can't ever pronounce that. Plantar fasciitis, the Pau Gasol injury from last year, and there was a question whether he can give it a go. He had to step out of the first quarter, and that's when the Heat made their run. But once Al Jefferson got back in, the game got closer, and They put up a fight. The Bobcats put up a fight to the very end. Al Jefferson is clearly the heart and soul of this Bobcats team, and they put up a bigger fight than I ever thought they would in this series, or at least on the road anyway. LeBron, of course, did his thing. He's done what he's done his entire career. Dwayne Wade had an off night, actually, but I feel like every time the Heat wanted to pull away, the Bobcats were right there. Had a chance at the end, but made a couple of bad turnovers. Couldn't get the shots when they needed to. And this was a really good game throughout. And the Heat ended up winning 101-97 to go up 2-0. One of the few 2-0s in the series. It seems to be in the Eastern Conference. But anyway, Miami, they just took care of business. I mean, it was a lot closer than anyone would have thought. Give a lot of credit to the Bobcats. I do have the theory that the Bobcats might take at least one game this series. I know I predicted them to get swept earlier, but they showed me a little something in Game 2 that makes me think, well, we'll see. You know, it was a good effort by the Bobcats. The Heat are 2-0, though, and Game 3 will be played on Saturday. So, ABC, I believe. So get ready. So the Spurs weathered the Game 1 storm of the Mavericks potentially upsetting them. So Game 2 should be a breeze for the Spurs, right? Oh, except the Mavericks were the team that came into San Antonio tonight and looked like they were in control from the get-go. This was they did what killed them in Game 1. They stopped it in Game 2. Tony Parker had like 21 points in Game 1. He was held at 12 points tonight. Tim Duncan was almost nowhere to be seen tonight. And really the only real person that showed up for the Spurs tonight was Manu Ginobili. He had 27 points, and it felt like he couldn't miss a three. But other than that, the Mavericks were on top of this. I mean, I know they were only up 5 at halftime, but it was a 15-point lead before the Spurs went on a 10-0 run to end the half. But then the Mavs just dominated the second half and never looked back. There was no giving up a big lead in this game. Dirk didn't have a good game once again, but Monte Ellis had a pretty efficient game. 3 steals, 21 points. Sean Marion surprisingly had 20 points. And Devin Harris is continuing. He continued off the Game 1 momentum with 18. I'm going to say it. The Mavericks won 113-92, by the way. The Spurs are in trouble. Big time trouble, I think. They didn't really look that impressive in Game 1. In Game 2, they got clocked in the mouth, basically. And usually the Spurs get better, but they got worse this game. I know it's just one game, but this could be huge. Because now the Spurs have to go into Dallas and take one. And it seems like a Mavs team playing with a lot of confidence. And if the Spurs don't weather the storm soon, it could get bad and bad real quick. They could be done far sooner than anyone would have been expected. Game 3 will be Saturday, early afternoon TNT. Don't miss it. Thankfully for DVR, I could watch the rest of that Rockets-Blazers game as I do have an early morning class. That's why I look so different than right here. But let's get to that later. Rockets-Blazers. The first game featured impressive shooting performance by both LaMarcus Aldridge and Lillard. Surely one of them wouldn't do it again, right? Except LaMarcus Aldridge went off again. He dropped another 40-plus point performance, and he was just unstoppable. I don't know if the Rockets even tried to make adjustments, or if they did. If they did, it was not noticeable because LaMarcus was still draining shots like no one was on him in the first place. But the Rockets did start out hot, though, and especially Dwight Howard. I believe he had 17 points in the first quarter. Now, granted, after the first half, after his 25-point first half, he did slow down. And it was a tie game at halftime, I believe. Yeah, tie game. And then Portland just kept going. Like, when Howard stopped, Aldridge kept going. He was the Energizer Bunny, and he kept going. And he's basically the heart and soul of Portland. And it's worth mentioning that Damian Lillard, who had like 30 points the other night, He struggled shooting the ball. He was only 3 for 14, but he did get the line a lot. So he got 18 points and some critical rebounds near down the stretch when they needed him the most. The one person I noticed who hasn't shown up this series is Rocket shooting guard James Harden. Where have you been, bro? Someone needs to put out an Amber Alert. I mean, it can't be too hard to find a guy. He's got a huge beard. Yeah, you can't miss him. But he has been. I know he had 27 last game, but it took so many shots. In these first 2 games, he shot 12 for 45. James Harden is partially the reason why the Rockets have been losing. Other reason, they can't guard LaMarcus Aldridge. It's that simple. And it's costing them now because now they're 0-2 heading into Rip City, one of the loudest venues in the NBA. That smells trouble, and it could smell an early exit for the Houston Rockets. And so with that, the Blazers did win 112-105, and Game 3 will be in a ruckus Rip City Friday on ESPN. And if I'm the Rockets, I'm extremely worried about right now.